Well, hello there, and welcome back to another video. Today, I've got the latest UK box office results, and it's safe to say it's been a very quiet week. Now, if you missed the video from last week, the box office results are actually full of drama and really interesting if you know where to look and what you're looking at. And when we're talking about weekend box office results, we're talking about how much films made on the Friday, Saturday and Sunday of the last week. The reason we look at these 3 days is new films tend to come out on the Friday and simply most people tend to go to the cinema on the weekend. So first up today, the newbies. So I mentioned last week that 2 new horror films were going to be hitting the big screen this week. And it was A Quiet Place that debuted with a tidy £2.7 million, which, to put it into context, puts it well above last year's Get Out, which had about £1.8 million, but miles away from the horror hit of 2017, which was It, which had a staggering £9 million opening weekend. That's massive. But still, A Quiet Place has done a lot better than was expected, perhaps due to the gimmick it had, where the majority of the movie is silent, so watching it in the cinema, it's almost a test, an experience where you have to be as quiet as possible, because any sound that you make, everyone else will be able to hear. And it's been marketed really well as this unmissable experience. Can you be silent in the cinema? And looking at Twitter, apparently a lot of people couldn't. I love this tweet. This is my favourite tweet of the week. But in the UK in general, it was genuinely a very slow week at the box office. So to look internationally for a minute, in America, A Quiet Place is doing way better than expected. We talked a little bit about projections the other day. This film was projected to open at around the $30 million mark, and it actually opened at the $50 million mark. And again, it just goes to show the power of this film's marketing. They weren't marketing a movie, they were marketing an experience. So what does this mean going forward? Well, first up, it's a massive boost for real-life couple Emily Blunt and actor-director John Krasinski. This probably means in the coming weeks we're going to get an announcement of the next big project that John Krasinski is getting off the back of this. And for Emily Blunt, this is a much-needed box office boost for her. Her career is actually going really well, but if you look at the numbers of the films where she's been the solo lead, they haven't got anywhere near this. They're mostly in the sort of $30 million mark in terms of openings. And so although this is good for her as we approach Mary Poppins Returns in December, I don't exactly think that people went to see this film because Emily Blunt was in it. However, she and her management can use this film's success to boost her career even further, saying, you know that little horror film that I was in? Well, it did really well. That was obviously me. And the third big winner is Paramount. Paramount is one of the big 6 major Hollywood studios, but I'd say it's probably at the bottom at the minute. And although, as we covered in a video last week, they've announced a theme park in the UK, still, the studio hasn't been doing very well in recent years. And I look back, and the biggest studio opening before this film was Star Trek Beyond, which was back in 2016. And the reason that's so surprising is when we're talking about film releases, we've got these big Hollywood blockbusters which are super expensive, and so they usually get lots of money, and then all the other kind of middle of the road films. And the reason this is so impressive is it's a middle of the road film who's jumping up and playing with kind of blockbuster level openings. But that said, it's certainly not a blockbuster opening in the UK. And on that note, let's talk about this week's biggest loser. Ghost Stories couldn't even muscle up a measly £1 million with its UK debut this week. Wow, that's a bad wow. I almost feel sorry for Martin Freeman, but I wouldn't feel too bad for it because on paper this looked like the most generic horror film there is. And did you see it? I imagine not. I didn't. None of us did. Nobody did. And so if any movie studio executives are watching, hello. It's very unlikely, I'll be honest. When it comes to marketing, don't market a movie, market an experience. With Emily Blunt. The other debut this week was Love, Simon, which came in at number 4. And I'll confess, this week I had the choice of any movie to go and see, and I chose to go and see this one again. For me, Love, Simon is an instant classic of its genre. It's the kind of movie you'd watch as a teenager over and over again. Like I would have had the DVD of it and watched it on the little TV in my room. But comparatively, I've got to say, its box office results were pretty poor. And is that because it's generally a slow weekend? Well, I think it partially is. But also, personally, most of the people I know who have seen it got to see an early screening of some sort for free. And talking about marketing and experience, I think when it came to marketing Love, Simon, they kind of put it out as this instant classic and this tiny bit of history, and invited the main target audience to come and see it in the expectation that they would grab their friends and go and see it again. When I went to see the screening, I got a free lanyard, and when I went to see it in the cinema, I got a badge. They're just handing out free stuff. But it clearly didn't manage to captivate wider audiences, and it got me thinking whether that was because it was marketed too heavily as an LGBT film. Don't get me wrong, this is the first mainstream LGBT movie of its type, but it's also a great movie in its own right, and I think they could have done so much better in pushing that in their marketing and saying that if you're not a member of this community, you should still come and see this film because you're going to really enjoy it. But this kind of film rarely does amazingly at the box office anyway. They tend to make their money with on-demand or DVD sales. But that's just my opinion, and I'd be interested to hear what you think, especially if you saw it and thought, meh, that's not for me. Now, looking at Ready Player One, it slips down to 3 this week, which surprises me, actually. Last week, I said that I thought it was going to jump up to number 1. Perhaps the blockbuster market is a little bit full this year, or as I mentioned in Monday's video, when I went to see it, although I quite enjoyed it, the film felt really dated to me, and apparently some of you agreed. But one thing I didn't mention on Monday is how Ready Player One is basically an animated movie. Now, as you can probably see by this, I'm a little bit of an animation nerd, and animation is generally very looked down upon by the filmmaking community. Like when it comes to the Academy, animated movies have their own separate Oscar, which generally always goes to Pixar whether they deserve it or not. But I think finally the line between having so much CGI in a movie and it being animated is Ready Player One. And looking ahead at the next few years, there are more and more films that are animated being targeted at adults in the pipeline. But anyway, is there any good news this week? Well, that depends how you feel about Peter Rabbit, which holds for a 4th week at number 1 with only a 44% drop, which is very good for a film that has been out a month. The drop being the difference between how much money it made this week and how much money it made last week. Then Black Panther and The Greatest Showman continue to hog 2 places in the top 10, with Black Panther finally achieving £50 million in the UK. And for context, that is the kind of money that the big studios dream of when we're talking about this little island. And judging by what we've got now, it doesn't look like those 2 are going to slip out the top 10 next week either. So what is coming up this week? Well, the big new release is Dwayne Johnson's newest movie, Rampage, which is actually out today. You can go and see it right now. He's coming off the back of Jumanji, a film that defied all expectations in a similar way to The Greatest Showman, and it was at a similar time as well. But this is possibly because Jumanji was the only real competition for Star Wars The Last Jedi back in December. And so it just sat in the cinema over the holiday period. With the added bonus of it being a good movie, it meant that if you didn't want to see Star Wars, most people went and saw Jumanji. Now, Dwayne Johnson is a really interesting case, as he's one of the few Hollywood stars in 2018 that can sell a film with just their name. This is the dream for an actor. This is where Emily Blunt is hoping her career goes. But I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has done a good job in selling himself as both an action guy with films like San Andreas and a family guy with films like Jumanji. Is it Jumanji or Jumanji? I feel like I've committed to one of the 2. But judging by the trailers and initial reaction, Rampage looks to be a hybrid of this action family brand. But in the UK, is it going to be able to knock Peter Rabbit off its perch? We'll see. And then we've got another horror film, Truth or Dare, from Universal. And frankly, it's either going to take a sting out of The Quiet Place, or it's going to end up going down the same route as Ghost Stories. Or to be honest, I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle, but nothing tremendously exciting. But either way, the reason nothing important is coming out is cinemas are clearing the way for Avengers, which is now only a few weeks from coming out. The good news for the films on this list is that with no major film to counter-program Avengers in the same way that Jumanji did to the Star Wars back in December, will any of these 10 films, with maybe Rampage included, get an unexpected boost in the coming weeks? Because if you can't be a hit blockbuster in the opening weekend, you can certainly just sit it out and play the long game. But we'll have to wait and see. And on that ominous note, that's where I'm going to leave the show for today. If you want to watch more of me, I'll leave another video around here. And all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.